Aloha, everyone. This is Chesapeake Movie Thoughts, and we're talking Shazam today. I just went out to the theaters yesterday, saw Shazam, and it was a lot of fun. I really liked it. I liked it a lot. Really glad to see these DC movies becoming more of the light-hearted fare that I remember DC Comics being. I was collecting comics for a while in the early to mid '90s, and at that time I was more of a DC fan because I prefer the more lighthearted approach, and that's what I got with the DC comics. It was a lot of like really epic, but really lighthearted stuff. The Marvel comics at the time, although I did enjoy some of them. I was not as heavily into them because at the time it was more of the heavier stuff, the angstier stuff, the edgier stuff in the Marvel comics, and not so much in the DC. The DC was just these epic heroic stories of good versus evil, and they had good characterization. Don't get me wrong; they delved into the characters. They just didn't have them being just so quite as messed up. They didn't take it in such a dark direction. They kept it kind of light and fun. And that's what we're seeing here in Shazam. I think Aquaman did that to a certain extent, and I think Shazam definitely does that. Shazam is more of a comedy. As superhero movies go, it's mostly comedy. There is action, and it's not action packed, but where there is action, it's good action. But a lot of the film is going to be dedicated to the comedic potential of the basic premise, which is what happens when you give 14-year-old kid, just your regular average 14-year-old kid, superpowers like Superman's, and yeah, he does what a 14-year-old kid would do with those powers, and he has a lot of fun doing it. And it's a lot of good comedy, and it's just charming to watch. Um, there really isn't a whole lot of cynicism, I'd say, in the film, which is that's what I'm looking for, a lack of cynicism. That's what I want to see in a superhero movie. And to be fair, the this is a little bit different of a Shazam than we may be used to. Superman is often referred to as a Boy Scout, but there was one character in DC Comics that could out Boy Scout Superman, and that was Shazam. Here, not so much. Here, he's just more of an average kid. Now, when it opens up, at first I'm kind of thinking that they're maybe going with him being like this real delinquent, that maybe they're going to have him change over the course of the movie. His delinquency, I mean, getting into trouble, but his delinquency all has a purpose, and it's kind of the purpose is understandable. It's kind of um, a good-hearted purpose. He's trying to find his mother. He's an orphan. He's in foster homes. His mother just disappeared off the face of the earth, and so he's been trying to find him, and everything he's getting in trouble with, running away and getting in trouble with the police, it all seems to be tied into his quest to find his mother. And so in some ways it's kind of like when I reviewed Into the Spider-Verse with Miles Morales. He was starting off as like this troubled kid getting into trouble. I didn't get that there was like this purpose that I could think of as being noble underneath it all. It just all seemed to be just about him trying to figure out whether it was important to be virtuous or not. And whereas with young Billy Batson, I felt like there was a no. He understood he was compromising his virtue for a nobler purpose, which endeared him more from the beginning to me. So in my view, I mean, it's all subjective. It's all a matter of opinion. But in my view, to do a troubled delinquent kid turning it around and becoming a virtuous superhero, that's more how you would do it, at least in my book. So I did enjoy that. So there is that seriousness a little bit to the movie as well. There's a ton of goofiness. Don't get me wrong, but there is that seriousness that gives the movie the heart. and that's really important, I think, in many comedies, is that you have to have that heart in it, and this movie does. I love the family, the foster family he eventually ends up with, the one he eventually ends up staying with. They're they're a great group, and it's really fun to watch them. You can see how much they care. The foster parents that take him in, you can see how much they care and want to help every one of the kids they've taken in, and how each one of these kids is, in their own way, trying to find family in each other, and that's a large part of the arc that's going on in this movie, and that is just a really enjoyable, tugs at your heartstrings kind of thing. But while that's going on, there's a lot of this goofy stuff about like testing your superpowers. A lot of this wish fulfillment stuff is like, if you were a kid and you got these superpowers, what would you do? The movie is sometimes described as being big with superpowers. I mean, they advertised it as such, and that is exactly what you're getting. This is basically big with superpowers, and it's great. It's fun. It's enjoyable. You have a great time with it. There's some great action when it comes in. It's like great superhero stuff. It's kind of meta stuff. It's like you like these kids. This is in the DCEU. It's not heavily connected to the DCEU, but they do show you it's clearly in the same universe as the other movies we've seen. Superman exists, Batman exists, and at this point, it's like after like Justice League, so everybody knows all the Justice League heroes. They've been branded and marketed. They've got toys based on. So the toy stores look like our world's toy stores. They got like Justice League, Superman, Batman stuff on the shelves, and I say that because there is a fight scene in a toy store, which was actually pretty good, because we got a lot of that, a lot of these nods to Batman and Superman in there, plus a nod to Big. If you're watching, they'll make a very clear reference to the movie Big. So they were clearly aware that they were making Big with superpowers when they were doing it. But all of this stuff is just a lot of fun. Zachary Levi, as playing the part of a 14-year-old kid in an adult superhero's body, is like the perfect casting. That's one thing about these DC movies, is that with a few very glaring exceptions, they have been really good at casting. Now, a lot of times you've had like good performances as like Superman or Batman in movies that don't quite give them the right material to work with, but you can't deny that the casting was good. Notable exceptions are the casting of Lex Luthor and the Joker. I think those were just completely just wrong-headed. I have no idea what they were thinking with that casting. But for the rest of it, I mean, Wonder Woman's they nailed Wonder Woman. And I think they nailed Shazam here. Aquaman's great. Jason Momoa as Aquaman, he's great. I really like their version of the Flash. He's really funny. So casting wise, the DC movies have mostly been on point, with the exception of some of their major villains. Now, some of their not quite as major villains, like Harley Quinn, have been very well cast, but their major villains, they just weren't getting those right. I'm going to get a little off the subject, though, because we're talking about Shazam. The villain in Shazam, Dr. Savannah, is like a really intense... He's a really good counterpart to our kind of goofy superhero, because he's a really intense, really just... he's just a fully on board with the idea that he's just evil kind of character, and he's really intense about it, and he makes a good counterpart to Shazam. And I have to say the actor played the part pretty well. And I'm not as familiar with Dr. Savannah from the comics. I was aware of the existence. I know he was part of the Shazam Rogues Gallery. But I'm not as familiar with him, which is kind of probably helps. It probably helps it when you have a character that the audience isn't as familiar with, and you do something interesting with them, as opposed to a character that everybody in the audience knows, like the Joker or Lex Luthor, and then you try to make them into something that's completely different from what the audience knows them as. So that probably helps here. But I really don't have a lot bad to say about the movie. I mean, it's not gonna be my favorite superhero movie. It's a different kind of superhero movie. It's a comedy. It's fun. It's goofy, and it's just it keeps a smile on your face throughout it, and it's not trying to do anything too epic or too serious. I mean, like, it's not like the world is at stake here, although you get the impression that if the bad guys win here, then the world will soon become in danger. But it hasn't reached that point yet. So, I mean, it's like the story is kind of centered on our main characters. The stakes here are mainly for our main characters, which is good to get that kind of story. I mean, like Logan is a very different movie. It's a very serious movie, but it's again, it shows stakes that are really more so focused on our main characters. The stakes are going to mean more to our main characters than to the rest of the world. But of course, there's the consequences of them losing would be really bad for the rest of the world. But like, it's like that's not the story here. That would be the story later if that happened. Um, but yeah, I gotta say the movie is fun. It's not this big epic huge superhero movie, but it's in this superhero world. It has a lot of fun with it, which is something that a lot of modern superhero movies don't do. They don't really have fun with the idea of these superpowers, and this movie does. So I have to highly recommend this movie if you're looking for a good superhero movie. Which I mean, we're in the age of superhero movies. We're getting a lot of good superhero movies. A lot of mediocre superhero movies will be thrown in. Occasionally, a bad superhero movie, but we get an awful lot of good ones. So if you enjoy superheroes like I do, then you got to be grateful for the time we're living in because we're getting some great superhero movies. Okay, so go out and check out Shazam if you get a chance, and like, comment, subscribe, and that's a wrap.